Hey, welcome back. In this lesson we're going to be studying classical notation, and we're going to be focusing on using the bass clef and treble clef to find hymnal chord progressions, and we're going to be learning our first song here, first hymn out of the songbook. So, Amazing Grace. We're going to be studying it and learning how we can use the bass and treble to actually learn the song. Okay, so let's imagine that you never had heard Amazing Grace, you didn't know how it went. We're just using it here because everybody pretty much knows it. This lesson is going to teach you how you would use the classical notation and everything to find the progressions. And the next few lessons are going to teach you with other songs how to do the same thing. And then of course we're going to teach you how to dress these songs up in the next lessons after that. So the first song we're looking at is Amazing Grace. We've already looked at how the actual sheet music, and you may have even attempted to play it. Now this is of course one of the most well-known Christian songs in the Western world. But everything that we see here looks pretty easy so far, right? I mean, you have your typical notes. You've got the quarter notes, the half notes. Of course, there is a little bit of funky stuff here. You've got some stuff where like a half note's mixed up with a quarter note. So there's a little bit of some confusing stuff here that can be tough for you if you're really just starting out at learning how to play classical notation. Of course, we have the ties that mean you're holding now there's a difference between a tie and a slur. I want to say that ties are used to give the same note longer value. Don't ask me why they don't just write a half note or something instead of two quarter notes tied together. I don't know. But slurs mean you're supposed to make them really connected. Okay, it's supposed to be really connected sound. That's what a slur is, and you'll notice that if looks like a tie, but they're trying to join two different notes together. Okay, so we see the treble clef section, we see the bass clef section, we see the time signatures, 3/4 timing. We're going to count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Pretty simple stuff, right? See the bar lines, the horizontal lines. We see the notes. We also see the words. Now we notice here that this hymn has 4 verses. So if we're reading along with a hymnal, like we're singing in church or a small group, we would usually hold up the index finger to indicate verse 1, verse 2, verse 3, verse 4. To indicate which song we're singing. Hold up our fingers. We would also another thing we want to do, this might be something we've just done in local churches that I've been in, but one thing we've done a lot is verse 1 we've turned into chorus. Okay, now we don't read out of the hymnal a whole lot at churches I go to. We typically just sing and play the song, but occasionally we'll dig the hymnal out and sing out of it. But I have been at churches before where they use the hymnal extensively, and I understand some churches still do that a lot. Nothing wrong with that. But a lot of times, like when we're not singing with a hymnal, we'll use Amazing Grace. We'll give the chorus sign for that. So we'll say, okay, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. It's shown as verse 1 here, but we'll give a chorus sign. Now if we want to sing verse 1, or verse 2, verse 3, or verse 4, we'll hold up the corresponding finger. That's all dependent on how you want to do it with your local choir and your local church. But many hymns are known only by their first verse. The Battle Hymn of the Republic, Mine Eyes Have Seen the Glory. Everybody knows just the first verse. Nobody knows, it seems like, very few people know, I should say, the other verses that are in there. Okay, just for an example, most people can sing the first verse of Amazing Grace, but not as many people are familiar with the other 3 verses. So that's just a quick example for you. So we're looking at the sheet music here. Let's go ahead and get started and go through and learn how to figure out the chord progression using the notes. Okay. Okay, welcome back. So the first thing we're going to do is find out what key that this song is in. Now we notice there's 1 sharp, so going back to our previous lesson, we would find that this song is in the key of G. The key of G is the only key that has 1 sharp. So we know we're going to sharp all of the F notes. All of the F notes are going to be F sharps. Okay. Now playing hymns, we have several different options as Pentecostal or gospel musicians. The first option is to recognize and figure out the chord progression of the hymn and play it exactly as it is written. The second option, which I much prefer, and which this course will teach, is to recognize the basic chord progression and to dress it up to sound more modern, to sound more cool. Now most hymns were written a long time ago, and while the progressions are oftentimes interesting and very beautiful, and even modern, they can sound a little weird and antique. I personally don't think hymnals were meant to be sang out of and played exactly as it's written. I think they were just written and shown that way because they teach you, really they're showing you the parts that the singers are supposed to sing. Okay, those notes are the parts that the singers are supposed to sing in the song. And that's kind of what they were doing. I don't think they were trying to really build upon and say, okay, you have to play the song exactly like that. But a lot of people do that because they don't know how to improvise, they don't know chord theory like we teach you at Apostolic Praise. Okay, now what we strive to do, we strive to preserve the beauty, the original sound of the hymn, while building upon the basic progression to make it sound better. Now let me just say this and then we're going to get into it, I promise. We're not about trying to rewrite the song in chord progression and make it sound totally different. We are once again trying to preserve the original sound and basic chord structure of the song while at the same time adding some more modern, jazzy, advanced, and can I say fat chords to dress it up. Okay, you'll see what I mean in this lesson as we go on. Alright, so let's figure out the song using the bass notes first. We're going to look, now the way you figure out the bass note is you look at the lowest note on the bass clef. This song starts off with the G. Now, note here that the first notes over the A of Amazing Grace are the introduction. This is the third beat, so if you start counting 1, 2, 3 on the actual first measure, which begins on the notes on the amaze part of amazing, okay? On the maze part of amazing. Most hymns will start off with a little introduction like this. So the first note, G, which is, if you're looking at it, is the first notes which are right next to the 3, 4, and then there's a little line after them. That's the introduction, that little short quarter note there. The actual 1, 2, 3 will start on that half note, the very first half note. That's 1 right there. Okay, it can be a little bit confusing. I just wanted to explain that very quickly. Most hymns will start off a little bit like that. Now, when we look at the rest of the notes above this, we see that there is another G, an octave above, in the bass clef. There's also a B and a D in the treble clef. Okay, so this is obviously just a basic G major chord. That's all that we're doing here. Over maze, it goes to G and D in the left hand and B and G in the right hand. Okay, once again, this is just a basic G major chord with D in the left hand. Okay, sorry, with G and D in the left hand. Okay, now over ing, it goes to G and G in the left hand and D and G in the right hand. These are all just different variations of the same G major chord. So really you're just playing a G here. Then the bass note kind of goes to a B, you see that, in the left hand with a G in the right hand. Notice, let me make the note, this is not a true chord, as there are not 3 or more notes with the B. This is not truly part of the chord progression here, so you can kind of ignore this really. It's not really a note that you would have to say, you know what, I got to pay attention to this is part of the chord progression. It's really not part of the chord progression. Okay, let's do a couple more. Over grace, we see that it goes to D, G in left hand while playing D, G in right hand. Basically a G over D chord, if you will. Over how, it goes to D and F sharp in the left hand and C and A in the right hand, which is basically a D7 with a D and F sharp, with the F sharp in the left hand and the C and A in the right hand. Okay? Hopefully this is making sense so far. Over sweet, it goes to E and G in the left hand and B and G in the right hand. Now this is a basic E minor chord if you really just stop and look at it. Okay, over the word the, it goes to C and G in the left hand and C and E in the right hand. Okay, you recognize this is a basic components of a C major chord, just kind of mixed up a little bit. These are called chord positions. They're not truly, not like you're playing a true chord in one hand or the other. You kind of have it mixed up. Kind of an old style way of playing, but it can be really pretty, and you can kind of take some notes from it and maybe add it to your playing as well. All right. So after that, after the word the, we're going to go to over sound. It goes to G and G in left hand and B and D in right hand. Major G major chord again. Same thing on that. Okay, over saved, it goes to G and D in left hand and B and G in right hand. Over A, it goes to G and G in left hand and D and G in right hand. Over wretch, it goes to D and G in left hand and D and G in right hand, basically G over D. Over like, it goes to C and F sharp in left hand, D and A in the right hand. Now this is basically a D7 chord. We're just using a tritone in the left hand. Okay, it's using C as the bass, but it's really a tritone in the left hand. If you, those advanced students, if you guys have taken the other courses, you'll recognize that. Okay, over me, it goes to B and G in left hand and D and D in right hand, which is basically a G over B chord. Okay, so hopefully this is making sense so far. Now, you'll notice this kind of flies in the face of everything we've taught you up to this point, which is stay away from major chords, stay away from playing minor chords. They sound really boring. It's kind of flying in the face of what we teach a lot. Like I said, it's just, these are just the parts. These are not really what you're supposed to be playing. You're supposed to, you know, try to add in fills and add in stuff to dress it up, and make it sound good. All right, and we'll do that. We'll teach you how to do that as well. All right, so let's tackle the second half, the second part of the song now. Over I, it is G and G in left hand and D and B in right hand. Over once, it is G and B in left hand and D and D in right hand. Over lost, it's B and G in the left hand, D and G in the right hand, G over B. Over but, it is B and G in left hand and D in right hand. Once again, G over B. Over Now it is C and G in left hand, and C and E in right hand, C major chord. Okay, over am, it's C and E in the left hand, and C and G in the right hand, C major chord once again. This is a mouthful here. Over found, it is G and G in left hand, and B and D in the right hand. Alright, over was, it is B and G in left hand, and D in right hand, which is a G over B. Over blind, it is E and G in left hand, and B and G in right hand. Okay, basic E minor chord. Over but, it is D and G in left hand, and D and B in right hand, which is basically a G over D chord. Next chord is pretty much the same thing over now. Over I, it is D and F sharp in left hand, and C and A in the right hand, which is D7 with the F sharp in the middle on the left hand. Okay, and over C, it is G and G in left hand, and B and G in right hand, basically a C major, G major chord. All right, now if we actually take this progression and look at it, we've written down what the actual progression is right here. So you can see it's something like that. That's the basic progression that this song is doing. If you look at the actual notes and you take the different movements that we're looking at here, really simple, antiquated, quaint way to play it. Really, all it does is giving us the way that the chord, the way that the song is teaching us the melody, is teaching us the basic chord progression. And I don't think the people that wrote it meant it to be played every time like this, but they want it. We can feel free and liberty to dress this up and to play it in different ways. Okay, now. If you notice, this is a lot differently than you've probably heard it in church, commonly played. It's also a lot different than what you've learned in AP 102, 103, and 201, how to play Amazing Grace. We use the same melody and basic chord progression, but we substitute some more advanced chords and chord movements. So so we're adding a lot of more full chords that sound a little bit better. Okay, so if we acted like we had never heard the song before, and of course some other of the lessons are going to teach this a little more deeply. If you acted like you had never heard this song before and you were looking at it, you could look at basically the lowest note in the bass clef and figure out and of course we're going to teach you this in some other lessons, so if you don't get it right now, don't worry. But you can look at the lowest note in the bass note and look at the top note of the melody note, and if you know what key it's in, you can use your knowledge of music theory and chord theory to figure out the chord that goes with it. Okay, so we're looking at, you look at the song, you have a G in the left hand, in the key of G, you're probably going to be playing a G major chord in the right hand. See what I'm saying? So you can kind of look at that bass note, and you can really play the song, even though you might not know it. You might be able to kind of fake it if you're put on the spot and play that by using your knowledge of what the lowest bass note is, together with your knowledge of music theory and what the melody note is at the top. But especially the bass note, and you can really kind of play it if you're put on the spot. Once again, we'll teach you more about this in some other lessons. Let's go ahead and play Amazing Grace for you. We're going to dress it up a little bit. These are not our dress-up lessons, which are going to be towards the end of the course. I believe they're lessons 6 through 12, if I'm not mistaken. But we're going to kind of take this song and show you some stuff you can do with it. So. throw some little bit of jazz style type stuff in there. All right, so that's Amazing Grace, kind of throwing just a lot of stuff in there. We're not going to go through and explain everything we do, as this is not one of the dress-up lessons, but this is stuff we've all learned in the 201 lessons and stuff like that. You know, you're just doing D minor 9. All right, you're moving that note down, B, E, F, A over C sharp. Just the typical 5, 1, 4 progression. All right, C sharp diminished 7th, G over D, F sharp minor 11, B7 sharp 5 sharp 9, E minor 9, G, using the walk in 13, so G, G sharp, A, okay, F major 9, C over E, D, okay, and we use that. I use that a lot. You substitute that. Instead of going to an A minor 9 from the A9, or instead of going to the D, I do an F major 9. Okay, that flatted 7th sound really sounds pretty a lot of times. So, anyways, we're not going to explain everything we did here. Go through, watch it a couple times if you want, listen to it. But we'll explain a lot more about how to dress up hymns and songs with some fills and runs in the last couple of lessons, 6 through 12. God bless, and we will be back here in just a minute.